Have you ever had that perfect moment shattered by a revelation so devastating it feels like your whole world is crumbling? That's exactly what happened to me at what should have been one of the happiest celebrations of my life. I'm about to share how my mother-in-law chose our third wedding anniversary to expose my husband's secret second marriage, and how this shocking revelation changed everything I thought I knew about my life. This is my story. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to hear more stories like mine. The crisp autumn air in Boston carried the scent of fallen leaves as I stood in front of the mirror in our Back Bay apartment, adjusting my emerald green evening gown. 3 years of marriage to Daniel Mitchell had given me more happiness than I ever thought possible, and tonight was meant to be a celebration of that joy. I smiled at my reflection, thinking about how far we'd come since our first meeting at Symphony Hall. The Windsor Hotel's grand ballroom awaited us, and I had spent weeks ensuring every detail would be perfect. "You look stunning," Daniel said, appearing behind me in his tailored black suit. His warm brown eyes met mine in the mirror, and he planted a soft kiss on my neck. "Ready to celebrate, Mrs. Mitchell?" I turned to face him, straightening his tie with practiced ease. "More than ready. Can you believe your mother actually RSVP'd yes? I thought she'd find some excuse not to come, like last year." Daniel's smile flickered slightly, but I was too excited to notice the significance of that moment. "Patricia Mitchell attending one of our events is definitely something," he said, his voice carrying a note I couldn't quite place. My best friend Jess had helped me transform the Windsor's ballroom into something magical. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables decorated with burgundy and gold autumn themes, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the Boston skyline twinkling against the darkening sky. As guests began arriving, I felt a surge of pride. This was everything I had dreamed of, our friends and family gathering to celebrate our love. I spotted Patricia the moment she walked in, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a designer navy blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Unlike previous family gatherings where she maintained a cool distance, tonight she made her way directly toward us, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "Rachel, darling," she said, air-kissing my cheeks. "Everything looks lovely." The pause before lovely was subtle but pointed, her specialty. "Daniel, dear, you look tired. Are all those late nights at the firm wearing you down?" I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. "Just busy with cases, Mother. You know how it is." Patricia's eyes held something I couldn't read. "Oh, I know exactly how it is." She glanced at her watch, an oddly nervous gesture for someone usually so composed. "What time are you planning to make your anniversary speech?" "Around 8, I replied, wondering why she seemed so interested in the timing. "After the main?" "Course." "Perfect," she murmured, more to herself than to us. "Just perfect." As the evening progressed, I should have noticed the signs. The way Patricia kept checking her phone, how Daniel's colleague Marcus avoided making eye contact with me, the whispered conversation between Patricia and Dr. Anderson, our family friend, that ended abruptly when I approached. But I was floating on cloud 9, making rounds to greet our guests, accepting congratulations, and basking in what I thought was my perfect life. The main course, herb-crusted salmon with roasted autumn vegetables, was being cleared when I noticed Patricia making her way to the small stage where we had planned to give our anniversary speech. Daniel was across the room, deep in conversation, with Marcus, his back to his mother. "May I have everyone's attention?" Patricia's voice rang out through the microphone, causing conversations to halt and heads to turn. I smiled, assuming she was about to give a surprise speech. How wrong I was. "I apologize for interrupting this celebration," she continued, her voice carrying a weight that made my stomach clench. "But I cannot stand by and watch this charade. Continue." My conscience will not allow it." The room fell silent. Daniel had turned to face the stage, his face draining of color. I started making my way toward him, but Patricia's next words stopped me in my tracks. "My son, Daniel Mitchell, is not just married to Rachel. For the past year, he has also been married to Olivia Santos, a fact he has hidden from everyone in this room." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the room spin, my vision blurring at the edges. This had to be some horrible joke, another one of Patricia's attempts to undermine me. But when I looked at Daniel, the guilt written across his face told me everything I needed to know. "I have proof," Patricia continued, her voice breaking slightly. "And while this may seem cruel, revealing it here tonight, I believe Rachel deserves to know the truth. Everyone deserves to know the truth." I stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, aware of every eye on me, feeling the weight of their pity, their shock, their judgment. The perfect anniversary celebration had just become the stage for my public humiliation, and somehow, this was only the beginning of a night that would change everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear part 2 of my story, where I confront Daniel about Olivia and discover just how deep his deception really goes. Hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss any updates. Trust me, what happens next will shock you even more. Patricia's words hung in the air like poison, seeping into every corner of the Windsor Hotel's grand ballroom. In that moment of stunned silence, I watched as Daniel pushed through the crowd, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and panic. "Mother, stop this!" he shouted, but Patricia stood firm on the stage, her hand reaching into her designer handbag. "I have the marriage certificate right here," she announced, her voice trembling slightly despite her rigid posture, along with photos, text messages, and a lease agreement for their apartment in Cambridge. She began pulling out documents, laying them on the small podium one by one like cards in a tragic game of solitaire. My legs carried me forward without conscious thought. Jessica appeared at my side, her arm wrapping protectively around my waist. "Rachel, let's step outside for a moment," she whispered, but I shook her off. I needed to see these papers, needed to understand how my entire reality had just been shattered. The world seemed to move in slow motion as I approached the stage. Daniel reached it before me, trying to gather the documents, but Patricia held firm. "No more lies," she said to him, her voice carrying a mix of determination and sadness. "I raised you better than this." I grabbed the marriage certificate before Daniel could stop me. There it was in black and white. Daniel Mitchell and Olivia Santos, married at Cambridge City Hall 11 months ago. My hands began to shake so violently that the paper made a rattling sound in the silent room. "Rachel, please," Daniel started, reaching for me. "I can explain everything." "Explain?" My voice came out as a whisper, then rose to a shout that echoed off the ornate ceiling. "Explain how you married another woman while wearing the ring I gave you? Explain how you've been living a double life for almost a year?" The room erupted in murmurs and gasps. I saw Marcus Thompson, Daniel's colleague, trying to slip quietly toward the exit. "You knew, didn't you?" I called out to him, making him freeze mid-step. "How many of you knew?" Several faces in the crowd suddenly found the floor extremely interesting. Dr. Sophie Anderson, who had been our family friend for years, stepped forward. "Rachel, I only found out recently. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." I laughed, a hollow sound that scared even me. "Well, isn't this perfect? It seems I was the only one who didn't know my husband had another wife." I turned to Patricia, who still stood on the stage, her face a mask of grim satisfaction mixed with genuine concern. "Why now? Why here?" "Because you deserve to know," she replied, her voice softening. "And because I couldn't watch him destroy 2 lives any longer. Olivia is pregnant. The word hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. While I had been planning this anniversary celebration, picking out flowers and tasting cakes, my husband's other wife was carrying his child. The room began to spin, and this time when Jessica tried to lead me away, I didn't resist. She guided me to a small antechamber off the main ballroom, the sounds of chaos following us. I could hear Daniel arguing with his mother, guests talking, in shocked whispers, and someone, probably my sister Amy, telling people it was time to leave. "I think I'm going to be sick," I mumbled, and Jessica quickly grabbed a wastepaper basket just in time. As I heaved up the expensive anniversary dinner, I heard the door open behind us. "Rachel?" It was my mother, Linda, her voice thick with concern. "Sweetheart, your father is bringing the car around. We're taking you home." "Not our apartment," I managed to say between shaky breaths. "I can't go there." "You're coming to our house," she said firmly. "Jessica, would you help her clean up? I'll get her purse and wrap." Left alone with my best friend, I finally let the tears come. "How did I not know, Jess? How did I not see it?" Jessica handed me a tissue and a bottle of water from her purse. "This is not your fault."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Daniel is the one who betrayed you, who betrayed everyone. A soft knock at the door made us both turn. It was Patricia, looking less triumphant now, more weary. "May I come in?" Jessica moved to block her path. "I think you've done enough. Damage for one night." "No," I said, standing on wobbly legs. "Let her in. I want to hear everything." Patricia entered, closing the door behind her. For a moment, she just stood there, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Compassion. "I found out 3 months ago," she began. "I was at Massachusetts General for a checkup and saw them together in the maternity ward. Olivia was having an ultrasound, and Daniel. He looked so happy." My heart clenched at the image. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "I confronted him first," she said, sinking into one of the antechamber's velvet chairs. "He begged for time to handle it himself, claimed he would end things with Olivia. I wanted to believe him. He's my son, after all. But then I started digging, discovered they were actually married, that he'd bought her a house in Cambridge with money from his inheritance from Robert. I thought of my late father-in-law, how proud he'd been when Daniel and I got married. He'd be so disappointed." "Yes, he would," Patricia agreed softly. "I watched Daniel spin more and more lies, watched him hurt both you and Olivia. When I realized he had no intention of coming clean, that he was just going to keep living this double life until everything inevitably exploded, I couldn't stay silent anymore. But why here? Why at our anniversary party?" Patricia's eyes met mine steadily. "Because I knew if I told you privately, he would find a way to explain it away. He's become very good at manipulation. You needed to see the proof, and you needed witnesses. I'm sorry for the public humiliation, but I believed it was the only way to make the truth undeniable." A commotion outside the door interrupted us. Daniel's voice getting closer. "Rachel! Rachel, please, just let me explain." Jessica moved to block the door again, but this time I stopped her. "No, let him in. I want to hear what possible explanation he has for this." Daniel burst in, his perfectly styled hair now disheveled, his tie loose. He stopped short when he saw his mother. "Haven't you done enough?" he snarled at her. "Have I?" Patricia stood, drawing herself up to her full height. "Or have you done enough, Daniel? 2 wives? A baby on the way? How long did you think you could keep this going?" "Get out," he said through clenched teeth. "This is between me and Rachel." "No," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "She stays. Jessica stays. I want witnesses for whatever you're about to say, since apparently you can't be trusted to tell the truth." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Olivia. It started as a mistake. A single night when I was working late at the firm. She was a new paralegal. We had drinks. Spare me the details. I cut him off. When did you marry her? She got pregnant, he said, as if that explained everything. She was scared, alone in a new city. Her family is very traditional. They would have disowned her for having a child out of wedlock. I was trying to protect her. By marrying her? I laughed incredulously. While still married to me? That pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, he continued, his voice dropping. But by then, we had feelings for each other. I knew I should end it, but I couldn't. And now she's pregnant again. I finished for him. Tell me something, Daniel. What was your plan? Were you just going to keep this up forever? 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 lives? He stepped toward me, pleading. Rachel, I love you. What, Olivia? And I have. It's different. But you're my wife, my first love. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. Do you hear yourself? You're talking about us like we're both some sort of timeshare arrangement, like you can just divide your life between us and everything will be fine. I never meant to hurt you, he said softly. That's the worst part, I replied, feeling suddenly exhausted. You never meant to hurt me, but you made countless deliberate choices that led to this moment. Every time you went to her, every time you lied about working late, every time you kissed me while wearing a ring from another woman. Those were all choices, Daniel. Patricia spoke up from her corner. Olivia knows about Rachel, by the way. I told her last week. She was just as shocked, just as devastated. She thought you were separated, in the process of divorce. Daniel's face went pale. You had no right. I had every right, Patricia snapped. These women deserve to know the truth about each other, about you. Your father and I raised you to be better than this. I watched this exchange with a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a play about someone else's life. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the antechamber's gilt-framed mirror. My carefully styled hair now messy, my makeup streaked with tears, my emerald green dress that I'd chosen so carefully now wrinkled and stained from being sick. This was real. This was my life. I want a divorce, I said, the words coming out before I'd even fully formed the thought. But as soon as they were spoken, I knew they were right. Rachel, please, Daniel started, but I cut him off. No. You don't get to beg, not now. You're about to have a child with another woman, a woman you're legally married to, which, by the way, makes our marriage null and void anyway. It's over, Daniel. Jessica squeezed my hand in support, while Patricia nodded slightly, approval in her eyes. Daniel looked between the 3 of us, seemingly realizing he had no allies in this room. I'll have my things out of the apartment by tomorrow, he said finally. Don't bother, I replied. I won't be there. Jessica, can you come with me tomorrow to pack my things? I'm staying with my parents until I figure out what's next. Of course, she said. Whatever you need. Daniel lingered for a moment more, then turned and left the room without another word. As the door closed behind him, I felt something inside me break and heal simultaneously, like a bone being reset after a bad break. Patricia stood and smoothed her dress. I know you probably hate me right now, Rachel, and I understand, but I hope someday you'll see that I did this because I respect you too much to let you live a lie. I looked at my mother-in-law, soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, and saw her in a completely new light. I don't hate you, Patricia. You did what no one else had the courage to do, including me. Deep down, I think I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to see it. She reached out and squeezed my hand briefly, then left us alone. Jessica immediately pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry again, really cry. releasing all the shock and pain and anger of the last hour. "Come on," she said finally. "Your parents are waiting. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. Tonight, you just need to rest." As we left the antechamber, I could see hotel staff already clearing the abandoned tables in the ballroom. My perfect anniversary celebration ended in ruins. But as we walked through the hotel lobby, the cool, autumn air hitting my face as we stepped outside, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The truth, as painful as it was, had set me free. I didn't have to wonder anymore about the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the subtle changes in Daniel's behavior. I didn't have to pretend everything was perfect when my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. My father was waiting with the car, and as I slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of Daniel through the hotel's revolving doors. He was standing alone, looking lost, his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling Olivia, trying to damage control this situation. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass, and I saw the full weight of his choices settle onto his shoulders. Then my father pulled away from the curb, and Daniel disappeared from view. Just like that, my marriage of 3 years and my relationship of 6 became part of my past instead of my future. I leaned my head against the cool window, watching the Boston skyline slip by, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains of my childhood bedroom, painting unfamiliar shadows on the familiar walls. I hadn't slept, spending the night staring at my phone, watching message after message pour in from concerned friends and family. The news of Daniel's double life had spread through Boston's social circles like wildfire, each person adding their own theories and speculations to the story. Jessica arrived early, armed with coffee and a determined expression. "I brought reinforcements," she announced, setting a cardboard tray on my bedside table. Behind her, my sister Amy appeared, carrying several empty moving boxes and packing tape. "You don't have to do this," I said, sitting up and accepting the large coffee she thrust toward me. "I can pack by myself." "Not a chance," Amy replied, already opening the boxes with practiced efficiency. "Besides, someone needs to keep you from doing something stupid, like forgiving him." The drive to our Back Bay apartment felt surreal. The streets were the same as they had been 2 days ago, but everything looked different through the lens of my new reality. As we pulled into our designated parking spot, I noticed Daniel's car was gone. "At least we won't have to deal with him," Jessica muttered, grabbing the empty boxes from the trunk. The apartment key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door. Everything was exactly as we'd left it before the anniversary party. My magazine still open on the coffee table, Daniel's suit jacket draped over the dining room chair, our wedding photo prominently displayed on the mantel. I walked straight to that photo and turned it face down. "Where do you want to start?" Amy asked, setting down the boxes. "Bedroom," I decided. "I want to get my clothes and personal things first. Then we can figure out the rest." As I opened our shared closet, the first thing I noticed was the empty spaces where Daniel's suits should have been. He'd already been here, taken his things. Somehow that hurt more than I expected, the silent acknowledgement that he'd moved on so quickly. "Rachel?" Jessica's voice came from the master bathroom. "You need to see this." I found her standing by the sink, holding a small leather toiletry bag I'd never seen before. Inside were items that definitely weren't mine, different brands of makeup, hair products, a toothbrush. "He brought her here," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "To our home." "That son of a—" Amy started, but I cut her off. "Just help me pack. I want to get out of here as quickly as possible." We worked in focused silence, methodically sorting through 6 years of accumulated life. Clothes into garment bags, shoes into boxes, jewelry carefully wrapped in soft cloth. I was going through my bedside drawer when I found it. a small ultrasound photo tucked into the pages of my planner. "What's that?" Jessica asked, noticing my frozen stance. I handed her the photo. "I was pregnant 8 months ago. I miscarried at 10 weeks. Daniel was. He was so supportive during that time." My voice cracked. Now I wonder if he was with her then too. Amy sat beside me on the bed, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You couldn't have known, Rachel. He fooled everyone." "Did he?" I wiped away angry tears, because apparently quite a few people knew or suspected something. They just didn't tell me. The sound of keys in the front door made us all freeze. Footsteps in the living room, then Daniel's voice. "Rachel, are you here?" Before either Jessica or Amy could stop me, I stormed out of the bedroom. Daniel stood in our living room, former living room, looking as if he hadn't slept either. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. I forgot some papers I need for work, in my home office." He gestured toward the small room we'd converted into his workspace. "I didn't think you'd be here yet." "Well, I am. Get what you need and leave." He took a step toward me. "Rachel, can we talk? Without an audience this time." "An audience?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean like the audience at our anniversary party? Or do you mean without my support system to witness whatever lies you're going to tell me now?" "I deserve that," he said quietly. "But I want to explain everything. You deserve to know the whole truth." Jessica appeared at my side. "She deserves a lot of things, Daniel. Like a faithful husband who doesn't marry other women." He flinched but stood his ground. "Please, Rachel, 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd loved for 6 years, married for 3. The man who'd held me through my miscarriage, celebrated my promotions, planned a future with me. The man who'd been living a complete other life parallel to ours. "Fine," I said finally. 10 minutes. Jess, Amy, give us a moment." They retreated reluctantly to the bedroom, leaving Daniel and me alone in the living room that had witnessed so many of our happy moments. "Olivia lost the baby," he said abruptly. "Last night. She was so upset after my mother's revelation that she started bleeding by the time I got her to the hospital." I sat down hard on the couch. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, then wondered why I was apologizing to him. The doctor said the stress, the shock. He ran his hands through his hair. "This is all my fault. I've destroyed everything, hurt everyone I care about." "Why, Daniel? Just why?" He sat in the armchair across from me, the same chair where he used to read the Sunday paper while I made breakfast. "I met Olivia at a time when things between us were complicated. After your miscarriage, you were distant. I felt helpless, unable to fix things, to fix you." "Fix me?" I stood up, anger flooding back. "I was grieving. We lost a baby." I know, he said quickly. "I'm not explaining this well. Olivia was there. She was easy to talk to, and one thing led to another. When she got pregnant the first time, I panicked. Her family is very traditional, very religious. She was terrified of their reaction to an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. So I made a terrible decision." "You married her," I finished. "Without divorcing me first? Making both marriages legally questionable and opening yourself up to criminal charges." He blinked. "Criminal charges?" "Bigamy is a felony in Massachusetts," I informed him. "Jessica looked it up last night. You could face up to 5 years in prison." The color drained from his face. "Rachel, you wouldn't?" "Wouldn't what? Report a crime? Turn in someone who deliberately deceived multiple people and created a legal mess that will take years to untangle?" I shook my head. "I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. But you should know that Olivia would have grounds to press charges too." "Is that what you want?" he asked quietly. "To see me in prison?" What I want? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What I want is to wake up and discover this was all a nightmare. What I want is my life back, my marriage back, my trust in you back. But that's not possible, is it? He stood and moved toward me, but I backed away. Don't try to touch me. Don't try to explain anymore. Your 10 minutes are up. What are you going to do? I'm going to pack my things and leave. I'm going to call a divorce attorney. I'm going to figure out how to rebuild my life without you in it. I walked to the bedroom door. You can get your papers now. We're done here. Jessica and Amy emerged as Daniel disappeared into his office. They'd clearly been listening to every word. You okay? Jessica asked softly. No, I admitted. But I will be. Let's finish packing. We worked quickly after that, wanting to be gone before Daniel emerged from his office. As I was doing a final sweep of the bedroom, I noticed something glinting behind the dresser. Reaching down, I pulled out a delicate gold bracelet I'd never seen before. Another one of her things? Amy asked, peering over my shoulder. I turned the bracelet over in my hands, noticing an engraving on the clasp. To owe all my love, D. Pack it, I decided. I'll have Patricia give it to her. Just then, Daniel's voice floated down the hallway. He was on the phone in his office. I know, baby, I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm coming home soon. We'll get through this together. The words twisted in my gut like a knife. Home. Together. All the things I thought we had. All the things he'd been sharing with someone else. Rachel? Jessica's gentle voice broke through my thoughts. The car's loaded. We can go now. I took one last look around the bedroom where I'd spent 3 years of my life, where I'd dreamed of raising children, where I'd believed I was happy. Then I walked out, not bothering to close the door behind me. In the living room, I picked up the face-down wedding photo and removed it from its frame. Without a word, I ripped it in half, leaving the pieces on the coffee table. Let him find them when he came out. The elevator ride to the lobby was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we stepped out into the bright autumn afternoon, I saw Patricia Mitchell getting out of her car. Rachel, she called out, hurrying over. I hoped I'd catch you. Here. Do you have a moment? Jessica and Amy exchanged looks. We'll start loading your things into the car, Jessica said, taking the box I was carrying. Once they were out of earshot, Patricia spoke. I went to see Olivia at the hospital this morning. She lost the baby. I know, I said. Daniel told me. She's asked to see you. I stared at my mother-in-law in disbelief. She wants to see me? Why? She says there are things you need to know, things about Daniel that she discovered. Patricia hesitated. I think you should hear her out. I fingered the gold bracelet in my pocket. When? Tomorrow, if you're willing. I can drive you to the hospital. The rational part of my brain said this was a terrible idea. What good could come from meeting the other woman, especially when she was grieving the loss of her pregnancy? But another part of me needed answers, needed to understand how this had happened. Okay, I heard myself say. Tomorrow. Patricia nodded, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief hug. You're handling this with remarkable grace, she said. I want you to know that even though things are ending with Daniel, I still consider you family. As I watched her walk away, I realized something strange. In the midst of losing my husband, I might have gained a true relationship with my mother-in-law. Jessica appeared at my side. Everything okay? No, I said honestly, but maybe it will be. Eventually. We drove away from the Back Bay apartment for the last time, my life packed into boxes in the trunk. As we stopped at a red light, I caught sight of our reflection in a store window. 3 women in a car filled with cardboard boxes, like so many other people starting over. The light turned green and we moved forward, just like I would have to do. one day at a time. Massachusetts General Hospital loomed before me, its brick facade somehow more imposing than usual in the early morning light. Patricia's car idled at the entrance, her presence beside me both comforting and strange, a reminder of how drastically my life had shifted in just a few days. "Fifth floor, room 507, she said softly. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" I nodded, gathering my courage along with my purse. The weight of Olivia's gold bracelet sat heavy in my pocket, a tangible reminder of why I was here. The hospital lobby was quiet at this hour, just the occasional nurse hurrying past and the distant sound of phones ringing at the reception desk. The elevator ride felt eternal. Each floor brought a new wave of anxiety, a new temptation to turn around and leave. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, I nearly lost my nerve. But then I saw the sign, maternity ward. The cruel irony of this meeting place wasn't lost on me. Room 507's door was partially open. I knocked softly, hearing a quiet, "Come in" from inside. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the room. The woman in the hospital bed looked nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured someone more glamorous, more threatening. Instead, Olivia Santos appeared small and vulnerable, her dark hair tied in a messy bun, her face pale against the stark white pillows. When she saw me, her eyes widened with recognition. "Rachel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came." I remained near the door, unsure of the protocol for this impossible situation. "Patricia said you wanted to speak with me." Olivia struggled to sit up, wincing slightly. "Yes. Please sit down. There's so much you need to know." Reluctantly, I took the chair beside her bed, maintaining what felt like a safe distance. Up close, I could see the traces of dried tears on her cheeks, the way her hands twisted nervously in the hospital blanket. "First," she began, "I want you to know that I had no idea you existed. Not until Patricia told me last week. Daniel said he was separated, going through a difficult divorce." "That's not why I'm here," I interrupted, not ready to hear about Daniel's lies to her. "Patricia said you discovered something about him, something I need to know." Olivia's face changed, a shadow passing over it. "Yes, after. After I lost the baby, when they were doing tests, they found something strange in my blood work," the doctor said. She paused, gathering strength. "They found traces of misoprostol in my system." The word meant nothing to me. "What is that?" "It's a medication that can induce miscarriage," she said quietly. I never took it knowingly. But when the doctor told me, I remembered Daniel bringing me tea the night before, insisting I drink it to help with my morning sickness. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. "Are you saying—" "I think Daniel caused this miscarriage," Olivia's voice broke. "And when I mentioned the test results to Patricia, she told me about your miscarriage 8 months ago. Did he bring you special tea too?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. Daniel's concerned face as he handed me a steaming mug. "It's a special blend for pregnancy," he'd said. "I got it from that organic shop you like." 3 days later, I lost the baby. I must have swayed in my seat because Olivia reached out, catching my arm. The touch startled us both, and she quickly withdrew her hand. "I've already spoken to the police," she said. "They're investigating. But I thought you should know, in case you wanted to have your medical records from that time examined." My head was spinning with implications. "But why? Why would he?" "Money," Olivia said simply. "I did some digging after the police left. Daniel's inheritance from his father, the money he used to buy our house in Cambridge. It came with conditions, a trust that would only fully mature when he had his first child. But there was a clause. If he had no children by the time he turned 35, the money would go to charity instead." "He turns 35 next month," I whispered. "Exactly. I think he's been trying to get both of us pregnant." hoping one of us would give him a child before the deadline. But when it actually happened, he panicked, I finished, because a baby would make everything real, would force him to choose. Olivia nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I feel so stupid. All those grand gestures, the whirlwind romance, the rush to marriage, it was all about the money. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gold bracelet. Is this yours? Her eyes widened in recognition. Yes, a gift from Daniel last month. Where did you find it? Behind our bedroom dresser. He was bringing you to our apartment. Your apartment? Olivia looked confused. No, he always said it was his bachelor pad, somewhere he kept for work meetings. We stared at each other, the full extent of Daniel's deceptions unfolding between us. He hadn't just lied to us about each other. He'd created entirely separate narratives, separate realities, making each of us believe we had the real relationship, while the other was just a complication. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Ms. Santos, time for your medication. I should go, I said, standing quickly. Thank you for telling me about everything. Rachel, Olivia called as I reached the door. I filed charges this morning for the misoprostol. You should talk to Detective Sarah Martinez at Boston PD. She's handling the case. I nodded, unable to form words, and fled the room. In the elevator, I finally let myself break down, sobs racking my body as I processed what I'd learned. By the time I reached the lobby, I had my phone out, dialing Jessica's number. Jess, I need you to go through my medical records from the miscarriage, and I need a ride to the police station. Patricia was still waiting outside, pacing by her car. One look at my face told her everything. You know about the medication? You knew? I demanded. I suspected after Olivia's test. Results. That's why I wanted you to hear it from her. She opened the car door. I'll drive you to the station myself. The Boston Police Department's brick building was bustling with activity when we arrived. Detective Sarah Martinez turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to my story without interruption, taking detailed notes. We'll need to subpoena your medical records, she said when I finished. And I should warn you, cases like this can be difficult to prove. But with 2 victims and the financial motive, I don't care how difficult it is, I said firmly. He needs to face consequences for what he's done. Leaving the station, I felt simultaneously drained and energized. Patricia insisted on taking me to lunch, and we found ourselves at a quiet cafe near the Commons. I keep thinking about Robert, Patricia said, stirring her untouched coffee. He thought he was doing the right thing with that trust, encouraging Daniel to start a family. He never imagined his son would. Become a monster? I suggested. He wasn't always like this, she said softly. Something changed in him after Robert died. The pressure of the inheritance, maybe. Or maybe I just never saw who he really was. My phone buzzed, a text from Jessica. She'd found my medical records and was already in touch with Detective Martinez. Then another message popped up. Daniel had been trying to reach me all morning. He knows, I said, showing Patricia the messages. Olivia must have confronted him about the medication. As if on cue, my phone started ringing, Daniel's face appearing on the screen. After 4 rings, it went to voicemail. Seconds later, a text. Please, Rachel, let me explain. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I muttered, blocking his number. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Whatever happens with the investigation, you should know. I've already spoken to my lawyers. I'm changing my will. Everything I have will go to charity now, not to Daniel. I won't let him profit from hurting more people. I looked at this woman who had chosen truth over family loyalty, justice over protecting her only son. Thank you, I said simply. Don't thank me, she replied. Just promise me something. Don't let what Daniel did destroy your ability to trust. You have a good heart, Rachel. Don't let him take that from you. Later that evening, alone in my childhood bedroom, I finally let myself look at social media. The story had exploded. Not just Daniel's double marriage, but now the allegations about the miscarriages. Former colleagues were coming forward with stories of ethical violations at his law firm. A pattern was emerging of a man who had spent years carefully constructing false realities, manipulating everyone around him. A text from an unknown number caught my attention. It's Olivia. Patricia gave me your number. I'm being discharged tomorrow. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I think we both could use a friend who understands. I stared at the message. For a long time, considering the strangeness of life, how the woman I should hate might become an ally in healing from the man we both loved. Yes, I typed back. I'd like that. Setting my phone aside, I walked to the window, looking out at the Boston skyline glittering in the distance. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably crafting new lies, new explanations, new ways to escape, the consequences of his actions. But this time, he'd underestimated the women in his life. This time, the truth would win. The autumn wind whipped around the corner of the small cafe in Harvard Square where Olivia and I had agreed to meet. 1 week had passed since our hospital conversation, and the world felt simultaneously clearer and more complicated. I spotted her through the window, already seated at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. She looked different, outside the hospital setting, more composed, but also more real. As I approached the table, she gave me a hesitant smile. I ordered you a chai latte, she said. Patricia mentioned it's your favorite. The gesture caught me off guard. Thank you, I managed, sliding into the seat across from her. A fresh mug appeared almost immediately, carried by a barista who seemed determined not to stare at us too obviously. I wondered if she recognized us from the news coverage. Detective Martinez called this morning, Olivia began, diving straight in. They've issued a warrant for Daniel's arrest, but they can't find him. He's gone. The chai suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth. Gone where? They think he left the country. His passport shows activity at Logan International 3 days ago, a flight to Madrid. She pulled out her phone, showing me a news article that had just broken. The firm is also reporting that significant client funds are missing. I read the headline twice, letting the implications sink in. Daniel hadn't just fled from the criminal charges. He'd stolen money from his own law firm. The man I thought I knew was unraveling more with each passing day. There's something else, Olivia said, her voice dropping. I've been going through paperwork at the Cambridge house. I found documents. Rachel, I don't think this is the first time he's done this. My hand froze halfway to my mug. What do you mean? There were letters from a woman in Chicago. They're dated 4 years ago, before either of us. She was threatening to expose him for the same thing. 2 marriages, a pregnancy, a convenient miscarriage. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too crowded. Did you give these to the police? Olivia nodded. They're trying to track her down now, but Rachel, 4 years ago, that's when you and Daniel first started dating, isn't it? The timeline clicked into place. Daniel had moved to Boston from Chicago for a fresh start after what he'd called a bad breakup. He'd been so attentive, so understanding about taking things slow. Now I wondered if he'd been crafting his next performance, learning from past mistakes. We need to find her, I said firmly. This woman in Chicago, she needs to know she's not alone. A new voice joined our conversation. Already done. We both looked up to see Jessica standing at our table, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Sorry I'm late, but I think you'll want to hear what I found. I gestured for her to join us, making quick introductions. Jessica had been hesitant about this meeting when I first told her, but her investigative journalist instincts had quickly overcome any reservations. Her name is Rebecca Chen, Jessica said, opening her laptop. She's an architect in Chicago, and she's willing to talk. In fact, she's flying to Boston tomorrow. Olivia gripped her mug tighter. What did she say? Enough to establish a pattern. She met Daniel in 2019 when he was working at a Chicago law firm. Within 6 months, they were married. But he was also married to another woman at the same time, a legal assistant at his firm named Maria Torres. What happened? I asked, though I could guess. Both women got pregnant within months of each other. Both lost their babies after Daniel made them special health drinks. When Rebecca started asking questions, he disappeared, cleaned out their joint account and vanished. She tried to report it, but without proof about the miscarriages. They didn't take her seriously, Olivia finished, just like they might not have taken us seriously if we hadn't found each other. A thought struck me. The trust fund. It must have had the same condition back then, about having a child before he turned 35. Jessica nodded. Rebecca thinks he's been trying to fulfill the condition for years, moving from city to city when each attempt fails. The money in that trust? It's worth over $20 million. The number hung in the air between us. 20 million reasons. For Daniel to destroy lives, to play with women's hearts and bodies like they were pieces on a chessboard. I need some air, I muttered, standing abruptly. Neither woman tried to stop me as I hurried outside, gulping in the crisp October air. I hadn't made it far when I heard footsteps behind me. Rachel, wait. It was Olivia, with Jessica close behind. I can't process this, I said, running my hands through my hair. How many women? How many babies? How did none of us see through him? Because he's very, very good at what he does, Jessica said gently. He's a predator who specifically targets strong, independent women. He makes you feel special, understood. Then he uses your strength against you, makes you think you're too smart to be fooled, too confident to be manipulated. Olivia touched my arm hesitantly. But he didn't count on us finding each other, on us being stronger together than apart. Looking at these two women, one who should have been my enemy, one who had always been my friend, I felt something shift inside me. The shame and self-doubt began to transform into something else. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. Rebecca lands at Logan at 9 tomorrow morning, Jessica said. I've booked a conference room at my office for 10. I think it's time we pool our resources, don't you? Back at the cafe, we gathered our things and moved to Jessica's office at the Boston Globe. The conference room she'd mentioned was small, but private, with views of the harbor that seemed to stretch endlessly toward Europe, toward where Daniel might be hiding. We need to go public, Jessica said, once we were settled. Full exposure. Not just the criminal charges, but the whole pattern. Every detail, every manipulation, every lie. Won't that hurt the criminal case? Olivia asked. I've already checked with Detective Martinez. She thinks public pressure might actually help. Make it harder for him to hide, easier to extradite if necessary. I thought about the other. Women who might be out there, not just Rebecca and Maria, but others we didn't know about yet. Do it, I said. Write the story. We spent the next several hours going through everything we had: texts, emails, photos, financial records. Each piece we uncovered revealed new layers of Daniel's deception. He hadn't just been living double lives, he'd been constructing entire alternate realities. As evening approached, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Turn on the news. Channel 5. We huddled around Jessica's laptop, streaming the local news. The headline made my heart stop. Missing Boston attorney located in Spain, arrested by international authorities. The reporter's voice filled the small room. Daniel Mitchell, wanted on multiple charges including fraud and assault, was apprehended today in Madrid. Spanish authorities acted on an international warrant after Mitchell attempted to access accounts frozen by the FBI. Sources say Mitchell may be connected to similar cases in other cities. Olivia grabbed my hand. I squeezed back, both of us watching in silence as Daniel's mugshot appeared on screen. He looked nothing like the man we'd married. His hair disheveled, his eyes wild, his familiar confident smile replaced by something harder, colder. "He'll be extradited within the week," Jessica read from her phone, already receiving updates from her newsroom sources. They found him trying to access offshore accounts. Apparently, he's been moving money around for years, hiding it from everyone, including his own mother. A knock at the conference room door made us all jump. It was Patricia, looking both exhausted and determined. "I thought you might want company when you saw the news," she said. "I brought dinner." As we picked at Thai takeout, watching the story of Daniel's arrest play out across various news channels, I felt an unexpected sense of peace settling over me. Not happiness, it was too soon for that, but something like closure beginning to take shape. "Rebecca's flight is still on for tomorrow," Jessica confirmed, checking her emails. "She says she's bringing Maria Torres with her. Apparently, they've stayed in touch over the years, supporting each other." "Just like we will," Olivia said softly. Patricia looked around the room. At me, at Olivia, at Jessica, who had become so much more than just my best friend through all this. "You know," she said, "Robert would be proud of this. Not of Daniel, obviously, but of you women, of how you've handled this, how you've supported each other instead of letting him turn you against each other." "What happens now?" I asked, more to myself than anyone else. "Now," Jessica said firmly, "we tell our story, all of it, every detail, every manipulation, every lie. We make sure he can never do this to anyone else." "And then?" Olivia asked. "Then we heal," Patricia answered. "Together." Looking around at these women, my unlikely support system, my unexpected allies, I felt stronger than I had in weeks. Daniel had tried to play us all, had tried to keep us separated and suspicious of each other. Instead, he had inadvertently created something powerful, a sisterhood forged in shared pain but strengthened by shared purpose. Tomorrow, we would meet Rebecca and Maria. We would share our stories, compare notes, build an even stronger case. We would ensure that Daniel Mitchell never again had the chance to manipulate and harm women for his own gain. But tonight, in this moment, we were simply here for each other. And somehow, that felt like the biggest victory of all. The Logan International Airport terminal buzzed with early morning activity as we waited for Rebecca Chen's flight to arrive from Chicago. Jessica, Olivia, and I had positioned ourselves near the arrivals gate, each nursing large coffees and trying to calm our nerves. Patricia had offered to come, but we decided not to overwhelm our visitors with too many faces at once. Flight 2187 from Chicago O'Hare is now arriving at Gate C-15, the announcement crackled overhead. I watched as passengers began streaming through the gate, studying each face. Beside me, Olivia fidgeted with her phone, while Jessica stood perfectly still, her journalist's eye scanning the crowd. "That's them," Jessica said quietly, nodding toward two women who had just emerged. One was tall and elegant in a charcoal business suit, Rebecca Chen, I presumed. The other, shorter with warm brown skin and careful eyes, must be Maria Torres. They spotted us immediately. Jessica had texted them our descriptions. For a moment, we all just stared at each other, 5 women connected by one man's betrayal. Rebecca moved first, striding toward us with purpose. "Rachel?" she asked, though she clearly knew who I was. "I've been following your story in the news. I'm so sorry you had to go through this." "We all did," I replied, gesturing to Olivia. "This is the other Mrs. Mitchell," Rebecca finished with a sad smile. "Just like Maria and I were once the other Mrs. Mitchells." Maria stepped forward, her eyes moving between Olivia and me. "When Rebecca called about Daniel's arrest, about what happened to you both, I knew we had to come. No one believed us 4 years ago, but maybe now." "They'll believe all of us," Jessica interjected. "I'm Jessica Chen, by the way. No relation to Rebecca. I'm a journalist with the Boston Globe, and I'm here to help tell your stories." We moved our conversation to a quiet coffee shop in the terminal, away from curious eyes and potential eavesdroppers. As we settled around a corner table, Rebecca pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Everything I kept," she explained, spreading documents across the table. "Marriage certificate, bank statements, medical records, the letters I wrote to the police when they wouldn't listen, and this." She produced a small photograph, worn at the edges. It showed her and Daniel at what appeared to be their wedding. But the setting was different, the Daniel in the photo younger, his smile just as convincing but somehow less polished. "May 2019, she said softly. 3 months after he married Maria, though neither of us knew about each other then. He told me he had to travel frequently for work. Really, he was splitting time between our apartments." Maria leaned forward. "Just like he did with you two. The same pattern, the same lies, even the same romantic gestures. Did he bring you breakfast in bed every Sunday?" Olivia and I exchanged glances. "French toast and fresh berries," we said simultaneously. "His signature move," Rebecca said grimly, "along with the tea when we got pregnant." Jessica, who had been taking notes, looked up sharply. "Both of you also experienced miscarriages after Daniel gave you special tea?" Maria nodded. "I was 13 weeks along. Rebecca was 11 weeks. Both pregnancies ended within days of each other." "Just like us," Olivia whispered. I felt sick to my stomach. "How did you two find out about each other?" "Pure chance," Rebecca replied. "I went to surprise him at his office one day, saw him kissing Maria in the parking garage. When I confronted him, he tried to explain it away, said she was obsessed with him, that it wasn't what it looked like. But Maria and I talked, compared notes. The truth came out. And then he disappeared," Maria continued. "Cleaned out our accounts, vanished without a trace. The police said it was a civil matter, that without proof about the miscarriages, they couldn't pursue criminal charges. They treated it like a bad divorce, not like the crime it was." Jessica's phone buzzed. A news alert. "They've set his arraignment for next week," she announced. "The DA is charging him with multiple counts of fraud, assault, and financial crimes. They're also investigating the miscarriages as attempted murder." "Will you both testify?" I asked Rebecca and Maria. "Try to stop us," Rebecca said firmly. "We've waited 4 years for justice. We're not letting this chance slip away." Our conversation was interrupted by another arrival, Detective Sarah Martinez, looking sharp in her police uniform despite the early hour. "Ladies," she greeted us, pulling up a chair. "I hope you don't mind me joining. I have updates." We made quick introductions, then leaned in to hear what she had to say. "The Spanish authorities did a search of Daniel's hotel room in Madrid," Martinez began. "They found something interesting, a notebook, like a playbook, detailing his methods. It goes back 6 years before any of you. There were other women, other cities." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. How many lives had Daniel destroyed in his pursuit of that trust fund? How many other women were out there, thinking they were alone in their pain? "We need their names," Jessica said, her reporter's instincts kicking in. "We need to find them. Let them know they're not crazy, that it wasn't their fault." Martinez nodded. "We're working on it, but there's more." The notebook contained lists of potential future targets, successful women in various cities, their routines, their vulnerabilities. He was planning to do this again. "Until we stopped him," Olivia said quietly. "Until we stopped him together," I corrected. Rebecca reached into her bag again, producing more papers. "I brought something else. After Daniel left Chicago, I did some digging, found his previous addresses, employment records. There's a pattern: 2 years in Seattle, 18 months in Denver, a year in Austin. Always law firms, always abrupt departures. And always, I bet, coinciding with women coming close to uncovering his lies, Jessica added. Martinez made some notes. This will help establish his pattern of behavior for the prosecution. The more we can show this was calculated, premeditated, the harder it will be for him to claim it was all a misunderstanding, Maria finished. As the detective continued sharing details about the case, I studied the faces around the table. 6 women, each brought into this story through different paths, now united in purpose. The pain in the room was palpable, but so was the strength. There's something else you should know, Martinez said, closing her notebook. When they arrested him in Madrid, he was with someone, a woman, young, successful, recently widowed. They'd been dating for 2 weeks. He was already starting again, Olivia breathed. Not anymore, Martinez assured us. She's been informed of everything. And thanks to all of you coming forward, thanks to the evidence we've gathered, he's not going to have the chance to hurt anyone else. Jessica's phone buzzed again, another news alert. They've released his booking photo, she said, turning her phone so we could all see. The man in the photo was a stranger. Gone was the polished lawyer who had charmed us all, replaced by someone wild-eyed and desperate. His perfect mask had finally cracked. I'd like to run the full story, Jessica said, looking around the table. All of it. Your stories, the pattern, the methodology. Show other women what to watch for. Give voice to those who might have been too afraid or ashamed to come forward before. One by one, we nodded. It was time to turn our pain into purpose, our shared trauma into a weapon against future predators. But first, Martinez interjected, I need your help with something else. We found evidence that Daniel wasn't working alone. Someone at each firm helped him access client funds, falsify documents. In Boston, we think it was Marcus Thompson. The name hit me like a physical blow. Daniel's colleague, the one who had avoided eye contact at our anniversary party. The one who had tried to slip away when the truth came out. He knew, I whispered. He knew everything, didn't he? Martinez nodded grimly. We think he was Daniel's partner in all this, but we need proof. And that's where you ladies come in. Looking around at these strong, resilient women, I knew we would find a way to expose not just Daniel, but anyone who had helped him hurt so many people. Our shared pain had forged us into something powerful, a force for truth, for justice, for change. The morning light streamed through the airport windows, casting long shadows across our table of evidence, across our faces set with determination. We had survived Daniel Mitchell's elaborate con. Now it was time to make sure no one else ever had to. The Boston Globe's newsroom hummed with energy as Jessica led us through the maze of desks toward a private conference room. Marcus Thompson's role in Daniel's schemes had opened up a new avenue of investigation, and we were gathering to plan our next move. Detective Martinez had given us green light to help set up a sting operation, hoping to catch Marcus in a moment of vulnerability. He's been calling all of Daniel's former clients, Jessica explained, closing the conference room door behind us. Trying to do damage control, probably moving money around before the forensic accountants can trace it. Olivia, Rebecca, and Maria settled around the large table while I paced near the windows. The city sprawled below us, autumn sunlight glinting off the harbor waters. Somewhere out there, Marcus Thompson was going about his day, thinking he had escaped detection. I knew Marcus before all this, I said, turning back to the group. He and his wife Sarah used to join Daniel and me for dinner sometimes. She's a trauma surgeon at Mass General. Does she know? Rebecca asked. About his involvement? I shook my head. I don't think so. Sarah's dedicated her life to helping people. She'd never stay with someone who deliberately hurt others. A knock at the door interrupted us. Detective Martinez entered, accompanied by a tall woman I didn't recognize. "Ladies, this is Special Agent Karen Way from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. She's been tracking similar cases across state lines." Agent Way wasted no time getting to the point. "We've found a pattern of suspicious transactions at every firm where Daniel Mitchell worked. Each time, there was a senior associate helping him move money through various shell companies. In Chicago, it was James Peterson. In Seattle, Michael Crawford. And here in Boston, Marcus Thompson," Maria finished. "They were all in on it together?" "We think they were part of a larger network," Way explained, spreading photographs across the table. Each one specialized in identifying vulnerable, wealthy clients, usually elderly or recently widowed. They would manipulate trust accounts, retirement funds, using the money to fund Daniel's elaborate schemes. Jessica leaned forward, journalist instincts firing. "And what happened to Peterson and Crawford?" "Both disappeared shortly after Daniel left their respective cities," Martinez said. "We believe they're still in contact, possibly planning their next move." A thought struck me. "The dinner parties," I said suddenly. Daniel and Marcus would host these elaborate dinner parties for wealthy clients. They always invited their wives to make everything seem more legitimate. "Perfect cover," Agent Way nodded. "Nothing suspicious about lawyers socializing with their clients." Meanwhile, they could assess potential targets, gather information about accounts and assets. Olivia's face had gone pale. "There was a dinner party at our house in Cambridge, too, just last month. Elderly couple, recently retired." "The Hendersons," I cut in. "They were at our anniversary party. Mrs. Henderson tried to leave early, seemed upset about something." Martinez was already taking notes. "We'll need to interview them. If Marcus was targeting them, they might be able to help us build our case." "I have an idea," Rebecca said quietly. We all turned to look at her. "What if we use their playbook against them? Set up our own dinner party, but this time with us in control?" The room fell silent as we considered the implications. Agent Way was the first to speak. "You want to set a trap." "Marcus doesn't know that we know about his involvement," Rebecca continued. "He probably thinks he's safe, that all the attention is focused on Daniel. What if we invited him and Sarah to dinner? Create an opportunity for him to slip up?" "It's risky," Martinez warned. "These men are sophisticated criminals. They've managed to avoid detection for years." "But they've never faced all of us working together," Maria pointed out. "They're used to isolating their victims, keeping everyone separate. Together, we might see things we missed individually." Jessica had been typing rapidly on her laptop. "Sarah Thompson is scheduled to work a 36-hour shift starting tomorrow morning. If we plan something for when she's at the hospital—" "No," I interrupted. "We need her there. Marcus is more likely to let his guard down if everything seems normal. Besides, Sarah deserves to know the truth about her husband." Agent Y exchanged looks with Detective Martinez. "If we did this, it would need to be carefully controlled. Wireless surveillance, backup nearby, every contingency planned for." "I can host," Olivia offered. "The house in Cambridge. It's large, easy to monitor, and Marcus has been there before. He'd be comfortable." The plan began to take shape. Jessica would handle the invitation, making it seem like a gesture of reconciliation in the wake of Daniel's arrest. Agent Way's team would set up surveillance equipment. Martinez would coordinate with local police for backup. "What about Sarah?" Maria asked softly. "How do we protect her when everything falls apart?" I thought about the capable surgeon I'd come to know over dinner parties and charity events. We tell her privately, before the dinner. Give her the choice to help us expose him. "That's risky," Agent Way cautioned. "If she warns him." "She won't," I said firmly. "I know Sarah. She believes in justice, in doing what's right. Once she sees the evidence." My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. Marcus Thompson just left the firm, taking emergency personal leave effective immediately. He's running, Jessica said, reading over my shoulder, just like Daniel tried to. Martinez was already on her phone, barking orders. I want surveillance on Thompson now. Airport, train stations, his home address. Wait, I said, an idea forming. Check his credit cards. The Four Seasons. Everyone turned to look at me. I explained. It was their pattern. Whenever they needed to plan something without their wives knowing, they'd meet at the Four Seasons bar. Daniel let it slip once, thought it was funny that they had a regular table. Within minutes, Martinez had confirmation. Marcus Thompson had just checked into the Four Seasons, paid cash for 3 nights. He's waiting for something, Agent Way mused. Or someone? Peterson and Crawford, Rebecca suggested, coming to help him disappear like they did. Then, we don't have time for an elaborate setup, Jessica said. We need to move now. The next hour was a blur of activity. Agent Way called in her team, Martinez coordinated with hotel security, and we planned our approach. Sarah Thompson, reached at the hospital, agreed to meet me privately during her break. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when Sarah arrived, still in her scrubs, looking exhausted from surgery. Her face registered surprise at seeing not just me, but Olivia, Rebecca, and Maria as well. Rachel, what's going on? She asked, sinking into a chair. I got your message about Marcus. Gently, carefully, we laid out everything we knew. The fraud, the connections to Daniel, the pattern of deception. Sarah listened without interrupting, her surgeon's composure cracking only when we showed her the financial records Jessica had uncovered. All those dinner parties, she whispered. All those clients. I thought we were just being social, building relationships for the firm. You couldn't have known, I assured her. They were careful, professional. They used their wives to make everything seem legitimate. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Where is he now? Four Seasons, Martinez said, joining us. Room 718. We believe he's waiting for his associates to help him flee the country. Like Daniel tried to do. Sarah nodded, her voice hardening. What do you need from me? We outlined the plan. Simple but risky. Sarah would contact Marcus, tell him she was coming to the hotel after her shift. The conversation would give us probable cause to enter the room, catch any accomplices who might have arrived. They're going to try to paint you as an accomplice, Agent Way warned her. Claim you knew about everything. Sarah straightened in her chair, every inch the confident surgeon. Let them try. I've spent my career saving lives while my husband apparently helped destroy them. I know which side of this story I want to be on. As we moved into position around the Four Seasons, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in just a few weeks. The women Daniel had tried to keep separate were now united. The lies he and Marcus had spent years constructing were about to come crashing down. Sarah's voice came through our earpieces, steady despite everything. Marcus, I'm on my way. We need to talk. The endgame was about to begin. The Four Seasons lobby gleamed with understated luxury as Sarah Thompson strode through, her surgical scrubs replaced with casual clothes that wouldn't draw attention. From our hidden positions, we watched her project confidence while Agent Way's voice crackled in our earpieces. Remember, we need concrete evidence. Get him talking about Daniel, about the money. I sat in the hotel bar with Jessica, positioned to watch the elevators while appearing to be nothing more than friends having an after-work drink. Olivia monitored the back entrance. Rebecca and Maria covered the parking garage. Detective Martinez and her team were staged in rooms on either side of 718, waiting for the signal. Sarah's voice came through our earpieces, slightly tremulous but controlled. Approaching the 7th floor now. Agent Way's response was immediate. Audio feed is clear. Remember, if you feel unsafe at any point, use the code word hospital, and we move in immediately. Through the surveillance equipment, we heard Sarah's knock on the door to room 718. A pause, then Marcus's voice. "Sarah? I thought you were working a double shift." "We need to talk, Marcus. Now." The door opened, and the audio became clearer. "You shouldn't be here," Marcus said, his voice tense. "I told you I'd call you tomorrow." "Like you called to tell me you were taking emergency leave? Or like you called to explain why FBI agents were asking questions about you at the hospital?" A sharp intake of breath. "They came to your workplace? Damn it, this is exactly what I was trying to avoid." "By running, like Daniel did?" Sarah's voice grew stronger. "Were you going to leave me a note or just disappear?" The mention of Daniel's name changed something in Marcus's tone. "This isn't about Daniel. You don't understand what's happening." "Then explain it to me. Explain why our joint accounts are empty. Explain why James Peterson called looking for you. Yes, I recognized his name from Chicago. Explain why our neighbor saw you loading files into your car at 3 a.m. Through our earpieces, we could hear movement in the room, pacing, agitated. "Sarah, please, just go back to work. Forget you came here. Forget this conversation. It's safer that way." "Safer for who, Marcus? For you? Or for the clients whose money you helped Daniel steal?" Silence. Then, "What do you know about that?" "I know enough. I know about the dinner parties, the targeted clients, the way you and Daniel worked together. Did you help him with the other things too? The marriages? The miscarriages?" "No." Marcus's voice cracked. "That was all Daniel. I just handled the money." In the bar, Jessica squeezed my hand. He was starting to talk. Agent Way's voice was barely a whisper in our ears. "Keep him going. We need specifics." "Just the money," Sarah repeated. "You mean like the Hendersons' retirement fund? Or Mrs. Wilson's trust for her grandchildren?" "You don't understand," Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. "It started small, just helping Daniel move some numbers around. Then, he introduced me to James and Michael, showed me how much we could make. The clients never noticed. They were too rich, had too many accounts to track everything." "How many, Marcus? How many people did you steal from?" A harsh laugh. "You really want to know? Here." The sound of papers rustling. "See for yourself. Every client, every account, every transfer. I kept records of everything. Insurance, in case Daniel ever tried to blame it all on me." "Which is exactly what he's doing now, isn't it?" Sarah's voice remained steady. "What's in the blue folder?" "Flight details, contact numbers, the whole escape plan. Daniel made us all keep one, ready to go at a moment's notice. James and Michael are meeting me in Toronto tomorrow. From there, we split up, used the offshore accounts we set up years ago." "And me? Was I just part of your cover story? The respectable surgeon wife who made everything look legitimate?" A pause. "I love you, Sarah. That was never a lie. But this life we built. I couldn't walk away from the money. None of us could. Do you know how much we made? Millions, Sarah. All those rich clients, they never missed it. And Daniel. He made it seem so easy." "Hospital," Sarah said clearly, and everything exploded into motion. The door to room 718 burst open, Martinez and her team flooding in from both sides. Through our earpieces, we heard the chaos. Marcus shouting, Sarah stepping back, the thud of bodies as agents took him down. "Clear!" Martinez's voice. "Subject in custody. Evidence secured." In the bar, Jessica and I were already moving, toward the elevators. We arrived on the 7th floor to find Marcus being let out in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and betrayal as he saw us. The blue folder was in Agent Way's hands, and other agents were carefully bagging everything. In the room as evidence, Sarah stood by the window completely still. I went to her while Jessica coordinated with the forensics team. "You did amazing," I said softly. She turned to look at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He kept records of everything. Years of fraud, all documented. He was proud of it, Rachel. Proud of how clever they were, how many people they fooled." Olivia, Rebecca, and Maria arrived, forming a protective circle around Sarah. We had all been there. That moment of realizing the man we loved was a stranger, a criminal, a monster. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, watching as Marcus was led toward the elevator. "Now," Agent Way said, joining us with the blue folder, "we use his records to track down every victim, return what was stolen, and catch Peterson and Crawford when they show up in Toronto tomorrow." "They won't show," Sarah said quietly. "Marcus told me the plan knowing you were listening. They have other meeting points, other escape routes. That's how they've avoided capture for so long." Martinez nodded. "But now we have proof of the whole operation. Names, dates, account numbers. Your husband's meticulous record-keeping just brought down their entire network." Sarah flinched at the word husband. "I want to help," she said firmly. "With all of it. Finding the victims, documenting the evidence, whatever you need. I need to make this right." "You already have," I assured her. "You helped expose the truth. That's more than enough." Jessica was examining the documents agents had found. "There's something else here," she said slowly. "Notes about other lawyers at different firms, names, dates. I think this goes beyond just their small group." Agent Way took the papers Jessica indicated, her expression growing grave. "A larger network, using the same methods, targeting the same types of clients. This could be huge." "Then we keep going," Rebecca said. "We find everyone involved, every victim, every accomplice. We don't stop until the whole thing is exposed." Looking around the hotel room, at the evidence of years of calculated fraud spread out before us, I felt a fierce pride in what we had accomplished. Daniel and Marcus had thought they were untouchable, had counted on their victims staying silent and separate. Instead, we had found each other, found strength in our shared pain, found purpose in pursuing justice. Sarah's phone buzzed, the hospital needing her back for an emergency surgery. "Go," I told her. "We'll handle things here. You've done enough for tonight." She squared her shoulders, the confident surgeon returning. "Keep me updated. I want to be part of whatever comes next." "Of course," Olivia assured her. "You're one of us now." As Sarah left, Martinez began coordinating with her team about transporting Marcus and the evidence. Agent Way was already on the phone with her superiors, outlining the scope of what we'd discovered. Jessica was taking notes, preparing to break the story that would shake Boston's legal community to its core. I stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in a Spanish prison, Daniel was waiting for extradition. Probably still, believing he could talk his way out of everything. He didn't know that his carefully constructed house of cards had finally fallen, brought down not by one woman's accusations, but by many women standing together, refusing to be silenced. The night wasn't over. There were statements to give, evidence to process, plans to make. But standing there, surrounded by women who had become sisters through shared trauma and shared triumph, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that fateful anniversary party: hope. This was only the beginning. The Boston courthouse loomed. Before me, its stone facade casting long shadows in the early morning light. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus Thompson's arrest, and today marked the beginning of the preliminary hearings. Daniel would be appearing via video link from Spain, while Marcus sat in person before the judge. Jessica met me at the courthouse. Steps, press badge already displayed. "Ready for this?" she asked, handing me a coffee. Behind us, news vans were setting up, reporters positioning themselves for the day's coverage. Our story had exploded beyond Boston, drawing national attention to the web of fraud and deception we'd uncovered. Sarah Thompson arrived next, looking polished in a charcoal suit despite having just finished an overnight shift. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, but her spine was straight, her gaze determined. We had become her support system over the past 2 weeks, taking turns ensuring she was never alone as she dealt with the aftermath of Marcus's arrest. "They're bringing him in through the back entrance," she said quietly. "I saw the convoy on my way here." Inside the courthouse, we found Olivia, Rebecca, and Maria already seated in the gallery. Agent Way and Detective Martinez sat nearby, surrounded by files and documents. The evidence Marcus had kept had proven invaluable, leading to arrests across 3 states. James Peterson had been caught trying to cross into Canada, while Michael Crawford remained at large. Patricia Mitchell slipped into the seat beside me just as the bailiff called for order. "Daniel's lawyer tried to block the video link," she whispered. Judge denied the motion. The courtroom fell silent as Marcus was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed at odds with his usual polished appearance. He didn't look at any of us, keeping his eyes fixed straight ahead. His attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Eleanor Katz, stood ready with motions to dismiss. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Catherine Reeves presiding." The preliminary hearing began with the standard procedures, but the atmosphere crackled with tension. Everyone knew this was no ordinary fraud case. The implications reached far beyond Boston, threatening to expose corruption in law firms across the country. The large screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life, and suddenly Daniel's face appeared. He looked thinner than when he'd fled, his usual confidence dimmed by prison walls. His eyes scanned the courtroom until they found me, then quickly looked away. District Attorney James Sullivan rose to present the state's case. "Your Honor, what we have before us is not simply a matter of financial fraud. This is a systematic, years-long conspiracy that preyed upon vulnerable clients and destroyed multiple lives. The evidence we will present shows a clear pattern of predatory behavior, sophisticated financial manipulation, and calculated emotional abuse." Eleanor Katz stood to object, but Sullivan continued. "The state intends to prove that Daniel Mitchell and Marcus Thompson, along with their associates, operated a complex scheme targeting wealthy clients, particularly the elderly and recently widowed. They used their positions of trust as attorneys to access accounts, manipulate documents, and divert millions of dollars for their personal use." The next hour was a careful laying out of evidence, financial records, witness statements, Marcus's detailed notes. Sarah tensed beside me as Sullivan displayed records of dinner parties at her home, showing how Marcus and Daniel had used their wives' reputations to gain clients' trust. "Furthermore," Sullivan continued, "we will demonstrate that Mr. Mitchell's multiple fraudulent marriages were not merely personal indiscretions, but part of a larger pattern of manipulation designed to access trust funds and inherit Aunt's money. The systematic termination of pregnancies through administered substances shows a level of premeditation that elevates these acts to attempted murder." Daniel's face on the screen had gone pale. His attorney tried to interrupt, but Judge Reeves waved her down, clearly interested in hearing the full scope of the state's case. "We have evidence," Sullivan said, "that this network extends beyond the defendants present today. Law firms in at least 6 cities have been implicated, with potentially dozens of victims who have yet to be identified. The state requests that bail be denied for both defendants, as they represent significant flight risks and have demonstrated both the means and inclination to flee jurisdiction." Eleanor Katz finally got her chance to speak. "Your Honor, these allegations are sensationalized and largely circumstantial. Mr. Thompson maintained those records as part of his normal duties as an attorney. Any irregularities in client accounts can be explained through proper accounting. As for Mr. Mitchell's personal life, while we acknowledge his poor judgment in certain matters, these were private domestic issues that have no bearing on the financial charges." Judge Reeves peered over her glasses. Ms. Katz, are you suggesting that systematically drugging women to terminate pregnancies is merely a private domestic issue? We contest those allegations entirely, Your Honor. The state has no concrete evidence linking my clients to any medical complications these women experienced. That's not true! The words burst from my lips before I could stop them. The gallery erupted in whispers as Judge Reeves banged her gavel. Order, she commanded. While I appreciate the emotional nature of these proceedings, outbursts will not be tolerated. Sullivan stepped forward again. Your Honor, we have laboratory results confirming the presence of misoprostol in medical samples preserved from multiple victims. We have purchase records showing Mr. Mitchell procuring this substance under false pretenses. And we have Mr. Thompson's own notes discussing the timing issue regarding certain trust fund conditions. The hearing continued, with both sides, presenting arguments about bail and trial scheduling. Throughout it all, I found myself studying Daniel's face on the screen, trying to reconcile this man with the one I had married. He looked smaller somehow, less magical, like a stage illusion viewed with the house lights up. Finally, Judge Reeves made her ruling. Given the serious nature of these charges and the demonstrated flight risk, bail is denied for both defendants. Mr. Mitchell will remain in custody in Spain pending extradition. Mr. Thompson will be held at the Suffolk County Detention Center. This case will proceed to trial, with preliminary motions to be heard next month. As the courtroom began to clear, Daniel's voice suddenly filled the room. Rachel, please just talk to me for 5 minutes. There's so much you don't understand. Judge Reeves banged her gavel again. Mr. Mitchell, any attempt to communicate with alleged victims will result in additional charges. Bailiff, terminate the video link. The screen went dark, but Daniel's desperate voice echoed in my mind. Sarah squeezed my hand, understanding without words what I was feeling. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Jessica stepped forward, her press credentials clearing a path through the crowd. Agent Way and Detective Martinez flanked us, providing additional buffer from the cameras and microphones. Ms. Walker, how do you respond to the defense's claim that this was all a misunderstanding? Dr. Thompson, will you testify against your husband? Ms. Santos, is it true that more victims are coming forward? Patricia's car waited at the curb, ready to whisk us away from the media frenzy. As we pulled into traffic, Sarah finally spoke. They're going to drag this out, aren't they? Make us relive everything in court, try to discredit us one by one. They can try, Rebecca said firmly. But they don't realize what they're up against. We're not scared, isolated victims anymore. We're witnesses, survivors, advocates. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Stories going live in an hour. You should see this version first. She had attached a draft of tomorrow's Boston Globe article. The headline read, Breaking the Silence, How a Group of Women Exposed a Criminal Empire in Boston's Legal Community. The article detailed everything, the fraud, the marriages, the lost babies, but also our journey from victims to investigators to champions for justice. Jessica had captured not just the crimes, but the transformation that had occurred when we found each other, when we chose to fight back instead of staying silent. There's something else, Patricia said as we reached her house. The Bar Association called. They're launching a full investigation into every firm connected to Daniel and Marcus. Other lawyers are coming forward, saying they witnessed suspicious behavior but were afraid to report it. The whole system protected them, Olivia noted bitterly. All those people who saw things but looked the other way. Not anymore, Maria said. Now everyone's watching. Now everyone knows what to look for. Inside Patricia's elegant home, we gathered in her sunroom, emotionally drained but somehow stronger together. Sarah curled up in an armchair, finally allowing herself to rest. Rebecca and Maria sorted through new evidence Agent Way had provided. Olivia worked on her victim impact statement for the trial. Looking around at these women who had become my family through shared trauma and healing, I felt a fierce pride. We had taken our broken pieces and built something powerful, a sisterhood dedicated to exposing truth, supporting survivors, and preventing others from experiencing what we had endured. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jessica. "You need to see this. Turn on CNN." Patricia found the remote and we watched in stunned silence as the story broke nationally. Our case had become a catalyst, prompting investigations into law firms across the country. Women were coming forward with similar stories, recognizing the pattern we had exposed. "We did this," Sarah said softly. "We made them listen." "We're not done," I replied, thinking of all the work still ahead, the trial, the ongoing investigations, the other victims still out there. "We're just getting started." The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, warming the room as we continued our work. In a Spanish prison cell, Daniel might be plotting his defense. In a Boston jail, Marcus might be negotiating with prosecutors. But here, in this room filled with strength and purpose, we were writing a different story. One of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bonds formed between women who refused to be silenced. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but we would walk it together. The morning of Daniel's extradition dawned cold and gray, typical Boston weather for late October. I stood at Logan International's private terminal, watching as police vehicles assembled on the tarmac. After weeks of legal battles and diplomatic negotiations, he was finally being brought back to face justice. Jessica arrived with coffee and updates from her sources. "The Spanish authorities are in the air now. They're making one stop in New York before bringing him here. Agent Wei wants us all at the courthouse by noon." Sarah pulled up in her hospital, parking, still wearing surgical scrubs. She'd come straight from an emergency operation, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. "Marcus's lawyer reached out again," she said, accepting the coffee Jessica offered. "They're pushing for a plea deal." "Of course they are," Olivia said, joining us. "They've seen the evidence. They know how bad it looks." Rebecca and Maria arrived together, having flown in from Chicago the night before. The past month had been a whirlwind of depositions, evidence reviews, and court appearances as the case expanded beyond Boston. Their testimony about Daniel's earlier schemes had proven crucial in establishing his pattern of behavior. "Any word from Crawford?" I asked, referring to the still missing member of the fraud ring. "Agent Wei thinks he's in Southeast Asia," Jessica replied. "They've frozen his known accounts, but he had time to move money before we caught Marcus." The sound of approaching aircraft drew our attention skyward. A small government jet appeared through the clouds, descending toward the private runway. My heart began to race as reality set in. Daniel was on that plane. Patricia's black Mercedes pulled up to the terminal. She stepped out, looking immaculate, as always, but I could see the strain around her eyes. This was difficult for her too, watching her only son brought back in handcuffs. "The media is gathering at the courthouse," she informed us. "It's a circus out there." We watched in tense silence as the plane touched down, taxiing to a stop near the waiting police vehicles. FBI agents positioned themselves strategically around the tarmac while Detective Martinez coordinated with local officers. The plane's door opened. 2 Spanish officers appeared first, then Daniel, shackled and wearing a plain gray jumpsuit. He looked nothing like the polished lawyer who had shared my bed, nothing like the confident man who had manipulated so many lives. His eyes scanned the terminal windows, probably knowing we were watching. "Ladies?" Agent Wei's voice came from behind us. "Everything's set at the courthouse. We should head over now, beat the traffic." The drive downtown felt surreal. News vans lined the streets. Around the courthouse, reporters doing live stand-ups on every corner. Our story had captured national attention, becoming a symbol of systematic abuse of power in the legal profession. Inside, we were escorted to a private waiting room. The arraignment wouldn't begin for several hours. but Agent Wei wanted us all in place early. Sarah paced nervously, her phone buzzing constantly with updates about Marcus's plea negotiations. "They're offering 15 years, she said finally, reading a message from the prosecutor's office. "In exchange for testimony against Daniel and information about other members of the network." 15 years isn't enough, Olivia said quietly. "Not for what they did to all those people." "It's not just about prison time," Agent Wei reminded us. "Marcus's testimony could help us uncover more victims, recover more stolen funds. Sometimes justice takes different forms." Jessica was typing rapidly on her laptop, updating her ongoing coverage of the case. Her initial exposé had sparked similar investigations across the country, revealing a pattern of fraud and manipulation in prestigious law firms. "Another victim came forward this morning," she announced. "Seattle, 2017. Same pattern. Marriage, pregnancy, mysterious miscarriage, missing trust fund money." I felt the familiar mix of anger and sadness. How many lives had Daniel destroyed before we stopped him? How many women had suffered in silence, thinking they were alone? A knock at the door announced Detective Martinez's arrival. "He's in holding," she reported. "Arraignment's been moved up to 10:30. Judge Reeves wants to get ahead of the media circus." Patricia stood abruptly. "I need to see him first." We all turned to look at her. She hadn't visited Daniel in Spain, had refused his calls and letters. This would be their first face-to-face encounter since the night she exposed his crimes at our anniversary party. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. "He's still my son," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "And he needs to hear something from me before this begins." Martinez nodded. "I'll escort you down. 5 minutes, no contact." After they left, the room fell into contemplative silence. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts, our own memories of the man who had brought us together through his betrayal. Sarah's phone buzzed again. "Marcus took the deal," she announced. "He's agreeing to tell them everything." "Good," Rebecca said firmly. "Let him face what he's done. Help clean up this mess they made." The door opened again, and Patricia returned. Her eyes were dry, but her hands trembled slightly as she retrieved her purse. "How is he?" Olivia asked, unable to help herself. "Broken," Patricia replied simply. "Finally, truly broken. He tried his usual manipulations, but..." She straightened her shoulders. "I told him that Robert would be ashamed of him, that the money he chased, the lives he destroyed, it all went against everything his father believed in." Before anyone could respond, Agent Wei appeared. "They're ready for us. Remember, no reactions no matter what he says or does. Let the evidence speak for itself." The main courtroom was packed when we entered, journalists filling every available seat. Daniel was already there, seated between his lawyers, his hands cuffed to a metal loop in the defense table. As we took our places in the front row, he turned slightly, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since Spain. I held his gaze, refusing to look away. The man I had loved, had trusted, had planned a future with. He was a stranger now. Judge Reeves entered, and the proceedings began. The charges were read: multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, assault, attempted murder through the intentional termination of pregnancies, bigamy, and financial crimes across state lines. Daniel's lead attorney, Richard Hamilton, entered pleas of not guilty to all charges. Then came the arguments about bail, a formality given the flight risk, but Hamilton was determined to make his case. "Your Honor, my client voluntarily returned to the United States to face these charges." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "The defendant was arrested while attempting to access hidden accounts in Spain. There was nothing voluntary about his return." "Sustained," Judge Reeves said curtly. "Continue." Hamilton launched into a prepared speech about Daniel's ties to the community, his previously clean record, his willingness to surrender his passport. Through it all, Daniel sat perfectly still, his lawyer's mask firmly in place. Then the prosecution presented their evidence: financial records, medical reports, Marcus's detailed notes, testimonies from other victims who had come forward. With each new revelation, Daniel seemed to shrink slightly in his chair. Furthermore, the prosecutor concluded, given Mr. Mitchell's sophisticated network of associates and his previous attempt to flee justice, the state considers him an extreme flight risk. We request he be held without bail pending trial. Judge Reeves didn't hesitate. Bail denied. The defendant will be remanded to custody at Suffolk County Detention Center. As officers moved to escort Daniel out, he suddenly spoke. Your Honor, may I address the court? His lawyers tried to stop him, but Daniel shrugged them off. Judge Reeves considered for a moment, then nodded. I know I've made mistakes. He began, his voice carrying that familiar persuasive tone. I've hurt people I cared about, betrayed trusts that should have been sacred. But everything I did was driven by desperation to fulfill my father's wishes, to secure the legacy he wanted for our family. That's enough, Judge Reeves cut him off. Mr. Mitchell, save your explanations for trial. Officers, remove the defendant. As they led him past our row, Daniel tried one last time. Rachel, please, you know me. You know I loved you. No, I said clearly, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. I never knew you at all. The doors closed behind him, and suddenly I could breathe again. Sarah grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. Around us, the courtroom erupted in whispered conversations as journalists rushed to file their updates. Outside, we faced the media together. Jessica had helped us prepare a statement, which we delivered as a group, not as victims, but as advocates for justice. We spoke about the importance of believing women, of recognizing patterns of abuse, of standing together against systemic corruption. Later, at Patricia's house, we gathered to decompress. Agent Way brought updates about the ongoing investigation. More victims identified, more stolen funds traced, more conspirators under scrutiny. Crawford's accounts turned up something interesting, she told us. Regular payments to someone inside the bar association. Looks like they had help burying complaints, keeping their schemes hidden. How deep does this go? Sarah wondered aloud. As deep as we're willing to dig, Jessica replied, already typing notes for her next article. Looking around at these women who had become my family through shared trauma and triumph, I felt a profound sense of purpose. We had stopped Daniel, exposed Marcus, and uncovered a network of corruption that had preyed on vulnerable people for years. But our work wasn't finished. There were more victims to find, more truth to uncover, more justice to pursue. What had started as a personal betrayal had become a mission to protect others, to change the system, to give voice to those who had been silenced. The sun was setting over Boston, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, depositions, testimony preparation, endless meetings with prosecutors. But tonight, in this room full of strength and solidarity, we were exactly where we needed to be. Together, unbreakable, unstoppable. The Suffolk County Courthouse buzzed with tension as we prepared for another day of trial testimony. 3 months had passed since Daniel's extradition, and each day brought new revelations that shook Boston's legal community to its core. Today was particularly significant. Marcus Thompson would take the stand as part of his plea agreement. Sarah sat beside me in the gallery, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. She hadn't seen Marcus since his arrest at the Four Seasons, had refused his letters and phone calls from jail. Now she would have to face him while he detailed their shared life of lies. You don't have to stay, I whispered, as the bailiff called the court to order. Yes, I do, she replied firmly. I need to hear everything. Olivia, Rebecca, and Maria filed in behind us, followed by Jessica, who had been granted special press access to cover the proceedings. Patricia arrived last, taking her usual seat near the back, maintaining the careful distance she'd chosen since the trial began. Daniel sat at the defense table, still wearing his expensive suits despite months in custody. His legal team had grown, now including 3 high-powered attorneys from a prestigious New York firm. They had spent weeks trying to discredit us, painting Daniel as a troubled man led astray by others, suggesting our miscarriages were tragic coincidences rather than calculated crimes. Agent Way slipped into the courtroom just as Marcus was led in. He looked markedly different from the polished lawyer we'd known, thinner, grayer, his confident demeanor replaced by something more haunted. His eyes found Sarah briefly before focusing on the witness stand. "The state calls Marcus Thompson," the prosecutor announced. After the oath was administered, Marcus settled into the witness chair. The prosecutor, Andrea Chen, approached with purposeful steps. "Mr. Thompson, please explain to the court your relationship with the defendant, Daniel Mitchell." Marcus cleared his throat. "I met Daniel in 2018 when he joined our firm. We worked closely together on several high-profile cases. Eventually, he introduced me to James Peterson and Michael Crawford, explaining their system." "What system was that, Mr. Thompson?" "They had developed a method of identifying wealthy clients who wouldn't notice if small amounts went missing from their accounts. Usually elderly people with complex trusts, or recent widows dealing with inheritance matters. Daniel was particularly good at gaining their trust." "How did he do that?" "He used us, his colleagues, our wives, hosted dinner parties, charity events, made everything seem legitimate. Sarah." His voice cracked slightly. "My wife's reputation as a surgeon gave us credibility. Daniel's multiple marriages served the same purpose." The defense team objected, but Judge Reeves overruled them. Marcus continued, detailing years of systematic fraud. He explained how they manipulated documents, created false accounts, moved money through a complex network of shell companies. "And the trust fund condition," Andrea Chen prompted. "Please explain that to the court." "Robert Mitchell's inheritance came with stipulations. Daniel needed to produce an heir before turning 35, or the money would go to charity. When he learned about this condition, he became obsessed. That's when the pattern with women began." Daniel's lead attorney stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about my client's motivations." "Overruled," Judge Reeves responded. "Continue, Mr. Thompson." Daniel would identify successful women, usually in their late 20s or early 30s. Professional women with their own money, who wouldn't immediately question financial discrepancies. He would court them intensively, push for quick marriages. Then he would try to get them pregnant. Sarah's hand found mine as Marcus described what happened next. The careful administration of misoprostol, the calculated timing, the way Daniel manipulated each woman's grief to maintain control. "Did you help him obtain the medication?" Andrea Chen asked. "Not directly, but I knew about it. We all did. Peterson, Crawford, everyone involved in the network. We saw what he was doing, but the money. It was so much money." The testimony continued for hours. Marcus detailed every aspect of their operation. The corrupt Bar Association official who buried complaints, the offshore accounts where they hid their profits, the fail-safe plans they had developed for when everything inevitably collapsed. During a brief recess, Agent Way shared updates about the ongoing investigation. "Crawford's been located in Thailand. Extradition proceedings are underway. And based on Marcus's testimony, we're preparing to arrest 3 more lawyers from different firms." Sarah stayed in the courtroom during the break, staring at nothing. I brought her water, but she barely noticed. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew everything Daniel was doing to those women, and he helped him anyway. All those dinners, at our house, all those clients who trusted us." The afternoon session focused on specific victims. Marcus identified each woman Daniel had targeted, explained their role in his schemes, detailed the money they had stolen. When he reached my name on the list, his voice faltered. Rachel Walker was different, he said unexpectedly. Daniel actually seemed to care about her at first, but the trust fund deadline was approaching, and when she lost the baby— "Objection," Daniel's attorney practically shouted. "Sustained," Judge Reeves ruled. "The jury will disregard that last statement." But the damage was done. Several jurors were looking at Daniel with undisguised disgust. His careful mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the rage beneath. The day's testimony concluded with Marcus describing the night everything fell apart, our anniversary party, Patricia's public revelation, Daniel's flight to Spain. Through it all, Daniel sat motionless, his expression carefully neutral. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Jessica helped create a path through the crowd, shielding us from cameras and questions. Patricia's car waited at the curb, ready to whisk us to safety. Back at her house, we gathered in the sunroom that had become our unofficial headquarters. Agent Wei arrived with takeout and more case updates. The Bar Association official implicated in Marcus's testimony had been arrested trying to board a flight to Canada. "There's something else," she said, passing out containers of Chinese food. We found evidence that Daniel was planning to start over again. Before his arrest in Spain, he had already identified his next target, a wealthy widow in Madrid. Sarah pushed away her untouched food. It never would have stopped, would it? He would have just kept doing this, city after city, woman after woman. But we did stop him, Rebecca reminded her. All of us, together. Olivia's phone buzzed with news alerts. Marcus's testimony was already making headlines, sparking renewed investigations into law firms across the country. Other women were coming forward, recognizing the pattern, finding their voice. "The defense team will try to discredit everything tomorrow," Jessica warned, reviewing her notes. "They'll paint Marcus as a desperate man saying anything to save himself." "Let them try," Maria said firmly. "The evidence supports every word." As evening settled over Boston, we remained in Patricia's sunroom, drawing strength from each other's presence. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more revelations, more painful truths. But we were no longer the isolated, vulnerable women Daniel had targeted. Sarah finally spoke, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "I've been thinking about the hospital, about all the women I've helped through trauma and loss. How many others might be out there, thinking they're alone? We need to create something permanent. A network, a foundation, something to help identify these patterns and support the victims." The idea took hold immediately. Jessica started taking notes, her journalist's mind already mapping out possibilities. Agent Wei offered FBI resources and connections. Patricia mentioned her social network, the potential donors she could approach. Looking around at these extraordinary women, I felt a familiar surge of purpose. What had begun as a personal nightmare had evolved into something larger, a mission to expose corruption, support survivors, prevent future victims. The sun set over Boston, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Tomorrow would bring more battles in the courtroom, more painful testimonies, more truth revealed. But tonight, in this room full of strength and determination, we were already planning the next chapter. Daniel had tried to keep us isolated, using our silence to maintain his power. Instead, he had inadvertently created something powerful, a sisterhood dedicated to justice, to truth, to ensuring that no woman ever had to face such betrayal alone. The work ahead would be challenging, but we would face it together, unbreakable, unstoppable, united. The verdict came down on a crisp December morning, transforming the Suffolk County Courthouse into the epicenter of national attention. After 6 grueling weeks of testimony, 48 witnesses, and countless pieces of evidence, The jury had reached their decision in less than 8 hours. Sarah gripped my hand as we filed into the courtroom for the last time. The gallery was packed with journalists, legal observers, and other women who had come forward during the trial. Patricia sat in her usual spot, her face a carefully composed mask. Daniel stood as Judge Reeves entered, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame after months in custody. When the jury filed in, their faces were somber, avoiding his gaze. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Reeves asked the forewoman. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom held its collective breath as she read the litany of charges. Guilty, guilty, guilty. On all counts: fraud, conspiracy, assault, attempted murder. The maximum sentences would ensure Daniel Mitchell would spend the rest of his life in prison. He showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but I saw his hands trembling slightly on the defense table. When Judge Reeves ordered him taken into custody, he finally turned to look at us, his victims, his witnesses, the women who had exposed his crimes. Our eyes met briefly, and in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before: defeat. The master manipulator had finally run out of lies. Outside the courthouse, we faced the media together. Jessica had helped craft a statement that we delivered, as a group, emphasizing that this verdict wasn't just about Daniel Mitchell. It was about systemic change, about believing women, about standing together against abuse of power. Later, at Patricia's house, we gathered one last time in the sunroom that had become our sanctuary. Agent Wei brought news that Michael Crawford had been arrested in Thailand, ending the manhunt for the last member of the fraud ring. The foundation Sarah had envisioned was taking shape, with support pouring in from across the country. "It's really over," Olivia said softly, looking out at the Boston skyline. But we all knew it wasn't over. Not really. Our work was just beginning. What had started as a personal tragedy had evolved into a movement, a mission to protect others from experiencing what we had endured. As the sun set on this chapter of our story, we remained together, bound not by trauma, but by triumph, by the unbreakable bonds forged in our fight for justice. Some scars would never fully heal, but we had transformed our pain into purpose, and in doing so, we had found something more powerful than any con man's lies, the truth of who we really were, together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.